Once upon a time, in the frozen lands of the north, there lived a skald whose spirit was as indomitable as the mountains that surrounded her village. This mysterious figure, known for her skill with words, bore a responsibility few would dare to assume: to protect ancient secrets, stories that shaped the destiny of a rival clan. These secrets were not just words on parchment, but an invisible treasure, passed down by word of mouth and guarded as vigilantly as a sacred blade. It was said that the voices of the ancients echoed in their stories, and that anyone who attempted to extract them would pay a price too great to bear. However, what made her mission all the more dangerous was the fact that these secrets attracted greedy eyes. Many saw in them the key to dominion over rival lands, an advantage that would turn battles into victories. For this reason, the skald not only sang, but also moved like a shadow, carrying with her a code of cunning and courage. Her stories were laced with riddles, protecting their secrets even from those who listened without realizing it. Thus, her words became her armor, and her trust in her own instincts, her sword. But how could she keep something so precious intact in such a treacherous world? To her, every choice was a game of chess, a distraction here, a detour there, and the curious would eventually turn away, convinced that nothing valuable was under her protection. One day, however, a new kind of threat approached, something more persistent, more subtle, and one that would demand a strength from her that not even the ancient songs could foresee. And as the northern winds whispered promises of danger, she knew that the real challenge was only just beginning. Thora was born under a restless sky, where eagles circled the gray expanse, as if blessing her first cry. It was a tradition in the eagle clan to observe the signs of birth, and the flight of these majestic birds was interpreted as an omen of greatness. The daughter of a warrior and a weaver, Thora grew up among the stories of the ancients and the rhythmic sound of looms, a perfect balance between the strength and delicacy that shaped the people of her village. From an early age, she demonstrated an insatiable curiosity, enchanted not only by the legends sung around the campfires, but also by the silences between the words, as if even greater secrets were hidden there. Thora's gifts as a skald began to reveal themselves in childhood. While other children lost themselves in games, she sat at the feet of the elders, absorbing every detail of the narratives that formed the soul of the clan. It wasn't just her memory that was impressive, but the way she reinvented stories, as if breathing life back into them. By the age of 12, she was already known by everyone, and her voice, even at a young age, had the power to calm hearts or ignite them before battle. Clan tradition held that the best skalds were chosen by eagles, and Thora, with her piercing eyes and erect posture, seemed to personify this proud spirit. However, her path was not easy. To earn her place as a skald, Thora had to face challenges that tested her loyalty and courage. At the age of 16, she was sent to a distant mountain, where she was to spend a night alone, surrounded only by the cutting winds and the watchful eyes of the eagles. It was said to be a test of spiritual connection, where the soul must align itself with the force of nature. Upon her return, Thora said not a word about what she had seen or heard, but her eyes shone as if they carried the wisdom of the world. From that day on, her role as guardian of the clan's history was sealed. However, as every origin also carries the weight of destiny, the true impact of her journey was only just beginning to reveal itself. The Eagle clan, known among the peoples of the north as the Children of the Wind and the Rock, had an origin shrouded in mystery and legend. The story of its formation was passed down only by word of mouth, reserved for the skalds and clan chiefs, so that it would never be recorded on parchments that could fall into the wrong hands. It is said that, long before the first villages were built, a small group of exiles found refuge in a valley surrounded by impassable mountains. There, upon observing the eagles that inhabited the highest peaks, the exiles believed they had received a sign from the gods. They too should rise above adversity, just like those birds that defied the fiercest winds. The clan's identity was born not only of divine inspiration, but also of an unusual alliance. On a night marked by a reddish moon, while the elders were praying for protection, a colossal eagle descended from the sky and landed before them. Its gaze was so penetrating that many swore they felt their souls being probed. The animal remained silent for hours, as if waiting for a sign from the humans. One of the exiles, a woman named Brynhild, approached cautiously and offered a piece of meat. The eagle accepted it, but did not fly away. That night, Brynhild dreamed of a winged figure who revealed an ancient secret to her. Eagles were guardians of the winds and knew the paths between the worlds. They could carry messages to the gods and bring answers to those who were worthy. Brynhild's dream was not ignored. The exiles, now united under her leadership, decided to honor the eagles as their spiritual guides and protectors. They created rituals that involved offerings in the mountains and developed a symbolic communication with the animals based on gestures and sounds. The most capable were trained to interpret the eagle's behavior, believing that each flight, each call, brought coded messages from the gods. This knowledge was passed down only to a select few within the clan, known as the Eyes of the Winds. However, the secret that truly defined the Eagle clan was something even deeper. Legend has it that Brynhild was given a golden feather by the giant eagle, one that would not burn in fire or disintegrate over time. This feather was considered the key to an ancient power that connected the world of the living to the world of the dead. It was believed that by performing a specific ritual during a storm using the feather, a skald could open a direct channel to the ancestors and obtain answers to the clan's most pressing questions. However, this ritual was risky and could not be performed without consequences. The feather drained some of the vitality of the skald who used it, and there was a danger of attracting even the wrong entities, those that inhabited the dark corners between worlds. Throughout the centuries, the clan guarded the feather as its most precious treasure. It was kept in a stone vault, protected by runes and the constant vigil of the most faithful warriors. Only the chief skald and the clan chief were allowed to see or touch the feather, and then only in times of extreme need. The stories surrounding the sacred object became part of the clan's identity, reinforcing the idea that they were more than just a group of warriors and farmers. They were the guardians of a direct link to the gods and ancestors. Despite all their care, there were times when the secrecy was threatened. Enemies of the clan tried to invade the valley in search of the power promised by the legend of the golden feather. It was said that whoever possessed it could command the winds and manipulate fate. These attempts were always repelled with ferocity, but also with intelligence. The clan used the geography of the valley and guerrilla warfare to confuse invaders, often luring them into deadly traps. On one occasion, a group of enemies managed to capture one of the Eyes of the Winds and tried to extract information about the feather's location. However, the clansmen were trained to withstand any form of torture, and the secret remained safe. As time passed, the Eagle clan's fame spread beyond the mountains. Other people saw them as mystical, almost superhuman, as allies sought their blessings before undertaking great journeys or battles. The eagle became more than a symbol. It was a shared identity that bound each member of the clan in an unbreakable bond. However, the responsibility of carrying on this legacy was not light, and the skalds in particular felt the weight of this heritage in every word sung, in every secret preserved. Thora, as one of the clan's most brilliant skalds, felt this pressure like few others. She knew that as the keeper of the ancient secret, her mission went beyond preserving stories. It was about protecting the very soul of the Eagle clan. But in times of change and imminent danger, Thor also knew that the oldest secrets had a curious way of manifesting themselves, especially when least expected. In the frozen wastes of the north, where winter reigned longer than any king, a clan of nomadic warriors carved their legend in steel and blood. They called themselves the Valkyries, the Wolves of the Mountains, a name that commanded fear and respect among the peoples who crossed their path. These warriors were like the winter wind, unpredictable and relentless. They built no villages, nor did they claim fixed lands. Their home was wherever the next battle took them, and their riches were in the spoils of war and plunder. But behind their fame as raiders lay a deeper quest, an obsession that drove them like a primal instinct: the eagle feather. The legend of the eagle feather was a tale known to the elders of the Valkyrie clan. They believed that somewhere, the eagle clan guarded a sacred artifact, a single feather, bright as gold in the sun and cold as silver in the snow. It was said that the feather was not just a symbol, but a portal of power, capable of granting its bearer a vision that transcended time. With it, it was possible to foresee the fall of kingdoms, anticipate betrayals, and find paths through the darkness. For the nomadic warriors, who lived in the constant uncertainty of battles and migrations, the possession of something so grand promised more than victory. It promised control over their destiny. The Valkyries began to prowl the lands of the Eagle clan like predators on the prowl. They used the silence of the forests and the cover of the moonless nights to observe their movements. Every song, every ritual or story shared around the campfires was analyzed with obsessive attention. They did not seek only to plunder. They wanted to invade the essence of the Eagle clan, dismantle their trust and tear from them what they believed was their right. However, the feather was not something visible, nor was it within reach of ambitious hands. The secrets of the Eagle clan were as deep as the myths themselves, protected not only by Thor and her chance, but by a force that seemed to lie beyond the world of the living. Yet to the Valkyries, this was no obstacle. It was a challenge they were willing to face with all the ferocity of their souls. On a cold morning, under a pale winter sky, one of the Eagle clan warriors set out on a solitary hunt. It was Gunnar, a fearless but impulsive young man whose bravery often mingled with recklessness. His bow slung over one shoulder while his blade swung at his hip, he strode confidently through the forest that surrounded the clan's territory. The snow beneath his feet muffled his footsteps, but the silence was deceptive. Gunnar did not realize he was being followed. In the shadows of the trees, predatory eyes watched him. The mountain wolves had found their prey. The ambush was swift and brutal. Before Gunnar could react, the Valkyrie warriors surrounded him, their movements as synchronized as a pack on the attack. The fight was brief. Though brave, Gunnar was outnumbered and no match for the savagery of the Valkyrie. They captured him, but rather than kill him, they decided to use him. The Wolf clan leaders knew that a prisoner of the Eagle clan was more valuable alive than dead. Gunnar was taken to a hidden mountain camp, where the cold cut like blades, and began to be subjected to physical and psychological torture, each blow designed to break his loyalty and expose the clan's secrets. Days passed, and Gunnar resisted as best he could, until one of the Valkyries, as cunning as a lone wolf, changed his approach. Instead of brute force, he used sweet words and promises of freedom. He promised Gunnar riches, power, and even a chance to be part of the Valkyrie clan, a destiny many would consider glorious. The combination of pain, isolation, and persuasion slowly eroded the young warrior's defenses. In a moment of weakness, seduced by words and exhausted by torture, Gunnar revealed what he knew of the legend of the feather and gave clues to its location. As the last word escaped his lips, a cold smile spread across the faces of his captors. They had gotten what they wanted. Night descended upon the valley like a heavy cloak, hiding Gunnar's treacherous steps as he made his way back to the Eagle clan. His arrival was greeted with joy, but also with a certain veiled distrust. The young warrior claimed to have escaped the Vargrimes by sheer cunning, telling a tale of courage that stirred the pride of his companions. However, his presence carried something dark, a restlessness that lurked behind his eyes. Gunnar now had a clear mission, given to him by the wolves of the mountains, to recover the feather, the most sacred of the Eagle clan's artifacts, and deliver it to the Vargrimes. He waited patiently, watching and calculating. During the day, Gunnar resumed his duties in the clan, always alert to the gazes of his brothers in arms. He needed to appear convincing, irreproachable. When the night finally reached its deepest darkness, Gunnar made his move. With steps as light as the mountain breeze, he slipped into the main hall, where the feather lay under the watchful eye of seasoned guards. But his confidence in his familiarity with the place was his greatest ally. Carefully avoiding patrols, he reached the ornate pedestal where the relic rested, surrounded by symbols of protection and ancient reverence. With trembling but determined hands, Gunnar wrapped the feather in a dark cloth, smothering the silvery glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He knew there was no time to hesitate. Silently, he left the hole and escaped along trails known only to members of the clan. Adrenaline roared through his veins, every sound in the forest magnified by the weight of his betrayal. When he finally disappeared into the vastness of the mountains, Gunnar carried more than a sacred artifact. He carried the fate of the Eagle clan. But in the shadows of the night, the true consequences of his actions began to take shape, silent and ominous as the approaching storm. Gunnar arrived at the Vargrime camp with his heart torn between triumph and doubt. The darkness of the forest seemed to curve around the place, where the glow of the fires cast unsettling shadows over the fierce-eyed warriors. He handed the feather to the leader of the wolves, a man with a deep voice and a smile that reminded him of a predator watching his prey. For a moment, Gunnar thought he had earned the respect of the Vargrimes, but reality proved cruel and relentless. With a sudden gesture, the leader ordered his execution, and in a matter of moments, Gunnar was surrounded and beaten mercilessly. The young traitor fell, without even understanding the extent of his mistake. The Vargrimes, now in possession of the feather, celebrated with loud laughter and words of glory. The leader raised the artifact with eager hands, ready to begin the ritual that, according to legend, would make them invincible. However, as soon as his fingers touched the relic, a cry of pain echoed through the camp. The feather reacted as if it were alive, glowing brightly and emitting a heat that none of them could bear. The man fell to his knees, clutching his chest as a white-hot light seemed to consume him from within. The other four, overcome by greed, tried to intervene, but were met with the same terrible fate. One by one, the warriors succumbed, burned from the inside out, their souls seemingly ripped out by the relic itself. When silence finally fell over the camp, only ashes and the sound of the wind blowing through the trees remained. The feather, now resting on the blackened ground, seemed more imposing than ever, surrounded by an aura that pulsed with unsettling energy. Something greater was at play, something that not even the ancient skalds would dare explain. In the vastness of the night, the relic waited, untouched and implacable, leaving a trail of mystery and death for any who dared challenge its power. Thora, awakening from a troubled sleep, was overcome by an unusual sensation. It was as if the whisper of the eagles, which she often sang about in her stories, now spoke directly to her. An ancient call enveloped her, guiding her steps through the forest as if she were connected to something beyond her comprehension. Without warning the other members of the clan, she followed this intuition, moving with the precision of a seasoned hunter. The trees seemed to bend to make way for her, and the leaves whispered ancient secrets as she advanced. Arriving at the Vagrime camp, Thora felt the pulsing energy of the feather before she even saw it. It was as if her vision had been magnified by supernatural forces. Despite the rudimentary walls made of wood and stone surrounding the place, she could clearly see the devastating scene that was unfolding there. Gunnar, the traitor, lay on the ground, his expression of terror frozen on his face, a bitter reminder of his betrayal. Around him, 5 Vagrime warriors lay dead, their bodies scarred with burns that seemed to have come from the inside out, as if the feather had punished their insolence. Curiously, Thora noticed that the rest of the Vagrime clan was missing. The camp seemed abandoned, save for the dead and the feather, which lay in the center of all the destruction. Even from a distance, she could feel the power of the artifact, a weight that seemed to press against her soul. The silence was almost deafening, charged with a mystery that only increased her resolve. Something greater was at stake, something she needed to understand and face. The feather, glowing as if made of fire and gold, awaited its next guardian, calling Thora to fulfill her destiny. Thora advanced through the devastated camp with the caution of a seasoned hunter, but also with the urgency of someone who knew she was carrying a mission much greater than herself. The feather glowed brightly in the center of the destruction, like a flame that could not be extinguished. The silence around her was heavy, almost suffocating, but her determination kept her going. She believed that the danger had passed, that death had already claimed all those who dared to challenge the power of the artifact. But at that moment, Thora did not know that the real danger lurked in the shadows. The warriors of the Vagrime who had survived were hiding like hungry predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. They had heard her careful footsteps and sensed her presence even before she entered the camp. Hidden in nearby caves and behind strategic boulders, they watched with watchful eyes as Thora approached the feather. When she finally reached out to take it, the warriors appeared like lightning, swift and relentless. One of them knocked her down with the force of a well-aimed blow, while others held her down, tying her hands and feet with rough ropes. Despite their fierce struggle, the outnumbered group was overwhelming. Taking her to a high mountain, the group pressed on with determination. The journey was arduous, and the icy wind that blew overhead seemed to mock their plight. When they reached a secluded spot protected by steep cliffs, they made their intentions known. They placed the feather before her, as if it were a trophy, and commanded her to use it. The idea was clear: to force Thora to reveal the secrets of her clan, perhaps even to unleash the power of the feather for their own desires. Bound and surrounded by enemies, Thora felt the tension growing in the air, knowing that this moment could seal her fate and that of her clan. Thora was on her knees, her body exhausted and bruised, pain searing through every fiber of her being. The men of the Vagrime clan stood around her, their eyes merciless. Their leader, a tall, imposing man, gripped his blade tightly, waiting only for the right moment to act. "You have a chance to save your life, Scald," one of the warriors said, his voice thick with contempt. "Speak now, or the price will be high." She held her head high, despite the searing pain she felt. No matter what they did, she would never give up the secret. The ancient power she held was so much more than a mere relic. It was the key to something that could destroy or save her entire clan. "I will not speak," Thora replied with difficulty, but the firmness in her voice was still unmistakable. "The secret I hold is not mine alone. It is for the gods, and you would never understand its true value." The men laughed, without pity, but Thora knew they were losing patience. The threat was getting closer. Her arms ached from the restraints, and blood was dripping from her skin. But her courage still burned within her. "You have no choice, Scald," another man said, his blade now touching her skin. a warning that there was no more time. "We will break you until you speak." The sensation of her resistance being broken was almost more painful than the physical pain. Thora knew that if she did not resist, what came next would be even more devastating. But her spirit refused to give in. With a last spark of strength, Thora closed her eyes and, in a barely audible whisper, pleaded, "Old gods, hear me. Help me, or all is lost." And even as the words left her lips, a wave of biting cold invaded the room. The wind howled, as if the very air had been altered. Something was approaching, something beyond the comprehension of the men around her. The tension was rising, as if fate itself was about to turn. With a final gasp, Thora lost consciousness, her body falling heavily to the side. Thora, in her agony, was on the edge of the abyss. The pain was unbearable, and darkness was taking over her mind. Her breathing became heavier, and the sounds around her seemed to distort, until they disappeared completely. She no longer felt her bound hands or the weight of the steel against her skin. Only an absolute emptiness, as if the world around her was fading away. It was then that, in the last breath of her consciousness, something extraordinary happened. There, at the top of the mountain, where the cutting wind swept the rocks and the sky stretched endlessly, a shape stood out against the gray background of the clouds. An imposing and magnificent figure that made the very air seem to vibrate with its presence. Thora did not know if she was delirious or if, in fact, something divine was approaching. But the vision was real. Real as the icy wind that now seemed to caress her face. A huge eagle appeared, as if it had been forged from the storm itself. Its feathers were a deep gold, like the dawning sun, but they shimmered with an ethereal light, as if they were made of pure energy. Its immense wings beat with such awesome force that the air around them trembled. Each movement sent a wave of power through the mountains, like a silent roar that reverberated through every rock, every tree, as if nature itself were answering its call. The eagle's eyes were deep, an intense blue, like icy mountain lakes, piercing the soul of any being who dared to look directly into it. Its talons were sharp, more powerful than any forged blade, and its beak, which gleamed as if made of ivory, seemed capable of tearing the very fabric of the world. The silence, until then oppressive, was broken by a sound that made the bones tremble, the beating of the eagle's wings. The sound was deafening, an imposing crash that seemed to come from a distant place, yet so close at the same time, as if the sky itself were opening up. With each movement of its wings, a fierce and wild wind was released, sweeping everything around it. Rocks shattered. The men around Thora were thrown into the abyss, their armor shattering like glass, their screams of terror being drowned out by the sound of the storm created by the eagle. Thora could not clearly see what was happening, but she felt the force of the wind, the destruction that the eagle wreaked around her. The sound of the wings cutting through the air was like thunder. In the blink of an eye, all the enemies that surrounded her were defeated, their lives being swept away by the divine power of the creature. The ground shook, the trees bent in the eagle's wind, and the Viking clan, who had threatened Thora's life, was annihilated without her even having the chance to see the fight. Everything was consumed by a storm of fury and light. With one last flap of its wings, the eagle made a movement that seemed to disintegrate the very air. The wind it generated gently enveloped Thora, unconscious until then. Her body was lifted by a current of warm, enveloping air, which made her feel life returning to her. The pain disappeared, and consciousness returned. She woke with a start, her body still shaking, but now filled with a new and invigorating energy. The eagle, now hovering above her, looked down with its deep, wise eyes. Its presence was immense, almost divine, as if time and space itself bowed before it. Thora, still dazed, felt a wave of calm and strength infiltrate her soul, as if she were being blessed by something that transcended human comprehension. Thora, daughter of the eagle. The eagle's voice echoed in Thora's mind, clear and deep, but soft as the wind in the mountains. The eagle clan is in danger. The secret you keep has been revealed, and the dark forces that seek to use you already know your whereabouts. What is at stake now is not only the survival of your people, but the fate of everything you know. Thora, still feeling the weight of the words, looked at the eagle, unsure of what to say. But the creature continued, its voice sounding like an ancient echo, a whisper from the mountains themselves. You must flee to the west. Take the feather with you, for it will be the key to protecting your people. I will always be by your side, guiding your steps, even when the darkness seems insurmountable. You are not alone, Thora. The eagle stretched out one of its enormous wings, and with a graceful gesture, dropped a golden feather, which floated gently into Thora's hands. As the feather touched her hands, a sense of power coursed through her entire body, as if the essence of the air itself had been imbued within. As gracefully as it had appeared, the eagle gave Thora one last look, its piercing gaze saying more than words could ever express. Then it flew away, its wings flapping one last time before disappearing into the clouds, as if it had never been there. Thora stood for a moment, immersed in the silence that remained. The wind that had once surrounded her had now ceased, but the feather in her hand seemed to pulse with an energy she did not yet fully understand. But one thing was clear. The journey she was about to undertake would be fraught with danger, but also with a power she now knew she could call upon. And so, with a heavy heart but determination, Thora prepared to head west, where truth and destiny awaited. The eagle had warned her. Time was running out, and the future of the eagle clan depended on her choices. Thora, now with the golden feather firmly in her hands, felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The vision of the eagle was still fresh in her mind, the clear and powerful message echoing in her thoughts. The mountain wind and the strength of the mystical creature had imbued Thora with renewed courage. She knew what she must do. She knew she could not fail. With a heavy heart, she began her journey back to the eagle clan. The walk there was long, the terrain rough and treacherous, but Thora felt an urgency in her steps. The future of her people was at stake, and she could no longer hesitate. The sound of the wind, the rustle of the leaves, all seemed now part of a call that could not be ignored. Upon reaching the clan, the welcoming sense of familiarity was soon overshadowed by the tension in the air. The people of the eagle were gathered, their curious and suspicious gazes turned to Thora, who approached with a serious but firm expression. She knew the leaders would question her, and doubt would be natural. What she brought was something impossible to accept without a moment of reflection and consideration. Thora was led to the great meeting room, a circular space where the clan leaders gathered to make crucial decisions. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on her. Elder Huldar, the chief of the leaders, was the first to speak. Thora, Skald of the Eagle, you return once again to our clan. But this time, you bring weight to your words. Tell me, what has brought you so urgently to disrupt our lives? Her voice was deep and respectful, but there was a shadow of distrust. With a deep sigh, Thora raised the golden feather before them, as a symbol of her connection to the gods, and began to recount everything that had happened at the top of the mountain. She told them about the appearance of the majestic eagle, the destruction of the Vadrim clan, the message from the gods, and the imminent threat that loomed over them. He told them of the urgency of their mission and the need to move the clan west, where they would be safe. For hours, the room was silent. The sound of everyone's breathing was the only noise that filled the space. The leaders of the Eagle clan gathered in a long discussion, debating what Thora had brought. Some were skeptical, others were deeply moved by the gravity of the situation. Haldar, with his silver hair and imposing expression, remained silent for a long time, watching Thora with piercing eyes. "If what you tell us is true, and I have no reason to doubt you, then we are faced with something we cannot ignore," Haldar said finally, his voice full of seriousness. "We of the Eagle have always been guided by the wind and the stars, but what you ask of us now is a radical change. To go west, we must leave everything we know behind. Our fields, our homes, our roots." Thora did not look away. She knew this was the answer she would have to face. The gods demanded sacrifice, and she knew the fate of the clan lay in her hands. "I know, Haldar," Thora replied, her voice full of determination. "But the Eagle clan cannot hide forever. The secret we keep is not just ours. It belongs to all, and the gods are demanding that we move. The West is our only chance to survive and honor our ancestors." The tension in the room grew as the leaders pondered the proposal. Some, younger, were eager to follow Thora's lead, believing in the strength she brought with her divine message. Others, older and more conservative, were still undecided, fearful of what change would do to the stability of the clan. After what seemed like an eternity, Haldar slowly stood. He glanced at the other leaders, then fixed his eyes on Thora. "I know you would not make such a decision unless it was absolutely necessary. If the gods are with you, then we are willing to follow. We of the Eagle have always been guided by our strength and wisdom. And now, more than ever, we must unite on a new path. We go west." The decision was made. The Eagle clan, though with heavy hearts, began to prepare for the long journey. Families began to organize, their belongings being packed and clan members gathering in groups, ready to follow Thora. An aura of determination filled the air, as the eyes of the warriors and elders turned to the future. Thora, now the leader of her journey, felt the weight of her responsibility, but she also knew that she was making the right choice. The West represented renewed hope, a new beginning for her people. She felt the wind around her, as if the gods were whispering words of encouragement. It was time to leave. The Eagle clan's journey west was long and arduous, marked by unforeseen hardships, hostile landscapes, and the biting winds of uncertainty. The clan, still reeling from the necessity of leaving their homeland behind, set out with a spirit of hope, but the months that followed tested their limits. The decision to follow Thora, though initially met with skepticism by some, was soon questioned as the hardships of the journey mounted. For the first few days, the clan moved at a relatively steady pace. The children, women, and elders were packed into ox carts, while the warriors held the front, keeping watch and protecting. The trails were difficult, and the mountains loomed before them like insurmountable giants. The sense of being in unfamiliar territory was palpable, but Thora, with the golden feather in her possession, felt guided by forces beyond human comprehension. She firmly believed that the gods were leading her, but the weight of responsibility on her shoulders was beginning to take its toll. The weather, however, was not favorable. The storms began to intensify, with fierce winds and incessant rains making the journey even more difficult. The rivers, which in other times would have been only minor obstacles, were now swollen with water, making the crossing dangerous and slow. Many of the younger members of the clan began to question Thora's leadership, seeing her determination as obsessive and almost fanatical, while the older members, who had always trusted the stories of their ancestors, saw her journey as a possible folly. In one of these moments of great difficulty, when the rain fell incessantly on the clan and the winds blew furiously, a group of people separated. Led by one of the veteran warriors, Eric, who had always been skeptical of Thora's leadership, they set off south, believing that following the more familiar path would be less risky. Eric and his followers swore that the Eagle clan would be lost in the west, that the gods had turned away from them. Thora, though deeply shaken by the desertion, remained firm in her resolve. She knew that if the gods were with her, the right path would be the one she had chosen, even if some had to deviate. After weeks of marching, with the clan members' spirits growing increasingly tense and the trials piling up, the group approached a mountain range that stretched to the horizon. The trails were treacherous and the mountains were covered in dense, dark forests. During this stage of the journey, game became scarce, and fears of a food shortage began to grow. The Eagle people, accustomed to the vast lands of their former home, found it difficult to adapt to the harshness of the new lands, where the flora and fauna seemed unfamiliar. On one particularly difficult morning, when food supplies were at their limit and fatigue had taken hold of everyone, Thora had a vision. In the mists of the forest, she saw an eagle, the same one from before, soaring high in the sky, its gaze fixed and wise. It was as if the eagle, with its deep gaze, was giving her a sign. Thora, with renewed strength, led the clan to a large clearing, where a small village had been built by the ancient inhabitants of the land. The place, however, was in ruins, but still, the environment seemed blessed, as if something greater had protected this land. With the clearing before them, the clan found a source of fresh, clean water, and game was plentiful nearby, with deer and elk roaming the fields. Here, Thora felt that, at last, they were close to something new and promising. She called a meeting of the clan leaders and elders. Tensions were still high, but the promise of a new beginning gave renewed hope. The decision was made. The Eagle clan would begin its new life here. Over the next few months, the clan worked tirelessly to rebuild the village. Houses were built from timber gathered from the surrounding dense forests. The women, with their skill and skilled hands, began to weave clothes, while the warriors built protective walls around the new village, ensuring that it would be safe from invasion. The children began to explore the valley, marveling at the abundance of life around them, and the elders, now more confident, told stories at night as the campfire crackled. The valley, with its towering mountains, offered natural protection against invaders. The large lake that stretched through the center of the village provided not only water, but also rich food and fish. Hunting was good, and the surrounding fields began to flourish with time. The climate, although cold in winter, seemed milder than in their previous lands, and the stability they had achieved seemed to be the reward for all the challenges they had faced. Thora, with her resolute leadership, guided the clan toward a new future. She knew that although the time of hardship was passing, their new home would demand even more of her people. They had lost members, but they had also strengthened the bonds that bound them together. The arrival at the new settlement was, in a sense, the beginning of a new era for the Eagle clan. Although some skeptical voices still echoed, the people began to accept Thora's vision, and the promise of a safer, stronger, more united future began to blossom. The spirit of the Eagle clan, marked by its connection to the gods and the ancient strength of the eagle, was restored. After years of challenges and growth, the Eagle clan finally settled into their new home, surrounded by the imposing mountains that now seemed to be the guardians of these fearless people. The village flourished over time, becoming a symbol of the resilience and willpower of its people. Under Thora's leadership, the clan found a new identity, a new hope, and the story of their origins and the journey to the west became living legends, passed down by word of mouth. But as the years passed, Thora knew that her mission was far from complete. She had been the guardian of ancestral knowledge, the bearer of wisdom that had crossed generations. But, like all stories, hers must also come to an end. Thora, now older, with silver hair that blended with the mountain mist, felt that it was time to keep the last part of her legacy. The golden feather that had guided her during the journey and that symbolized her connection with the gods and with the Eagle clan. However, the decision of where to hide the feather, and ensuring that it would only be discovered by someone worthy, was not easy. She knew that the feather held a power beyond human comprehension. It was the link between the clan's past and future. Its secret needed to be kept, but it also needed to be revealed when the time was right. Thora made a final decision. On a still morning, when mist still shrouded the hills, Thora climbed alone to the highest peak of the mountains that surrounded the valley where the clan had settled. The cold stones and the biting winds did not deter her, and she walked with determination, the weight of the golden feather still firmly in her hand. When she reached the top, she looked out over the vast horizon, where the land stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a majestic panorama, worthy of the legends she herself had sung for so many nights by the fire. But at that moment, the silence of the mountain seemed to absorb her soul. She had reached the highest point. The peak, surrounded by clouds and wind, seemed the ideal place to hide the feather. There, nature seemed to embrace power and serenity, as if the mountains themselves respected the importance of that gesture. Thora, with a deep sigh, raised the feather toward the sky, offering it to the gods. It was the farewell to one cycle, but also the beginning of another. Carefully, she buried the golden feather in the frozen ground and, on top of it, placed an ancient stone, a marker that only those with a keen eye could discover. The secret was safe. Thora knew that the feather awaited the right moment to be found, when a new worthy skald would arise to tell the stories of the Eagle clan. Before leaving, Thora sat on the mountaintop, closed her eyes and felt the cool breeze caress her face. A sense of peace took over her heart. She knew that her mission was complete. The legend of the Eagle clan would not be forgotten, for she had ensured that the story would be passed on. But before leaving that sacred place, Thora made one more silent promise. She would choose a young skald, someone worthy of being her apprentice, someone who, in time, would discover the secret of the feather and pass it on to future generations. Years passed, and as promised, Thora found her successor, a young skald named Alva, a boy with the spirit of a warrior but the mind of a sage, began to learn the ancient war songs and stories of his people. Thora imparted to him the traditions, the rituals, and most importantly, the responsibility of keeping the flame of the clan's history alive. She guided him in his first steps as a skald, teaching him the importance of carrying on not only words, but also honor, wisdom, and respect for all that his ancestors had accomplished. In his years of apprenticeship, Alva listened to Thora's tales of the heroic deeds of the Eagle clan and the secrets held by the mountains. But, like all apprentices, he also had questions. One, a nagging doubt, began to plague his mind. What had happened to Thora's golden feather? Why did she never speak of its whereabouts? Why did the secret seem so important? On a clear night, under the stars, as Thora prepared for the final leg of her journey, she looked at Alva and, with a quiet smile, revealed to him the last part of her story. She spoke of the highest peak, of the place where the feather was hidden, and how he, Alva, would be the one chosen to find the secret when the time was right. The young skald, now burdened with his new responsibility, swore in his heart that one day he would follow in Thora's footsteps and climb to the mountains where the future of the Eagle clan awaited to be unveiled. He knew that he would be more than just a keeper of history. He would be the teller of the clan's destiny. And so, Thora's story came to an end. But her legend, the history of her people, and the secret of the golden feather continued to be passed down from generation to generation. And each skald who followed, each future bearer of the words, would carry with them the burden of keeping the eagle's flame alive and the commitment to one day reveal, when the time was right, the place where the golden feather lay, waiting to be discovered. Thor's legacy would not be lost. It lived on in the stories, in the songs, and in the generations who continued to walk, guided by the strength of the eagle. And the eagle clan, with its resilience and its deep roots in the mountains, would never be forgotten. Did you like this story? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next epic sagas. The journey continues.